Hey everyone, just a quick reminder. Only about 25% of you watching are subscribed to the channel. If you're enjoying the content, hitting that subscribe button would really help the channel grow. And while you're at it, smash that like button too. It helps a ton, and lets me know you're enjoying the content. Thanks for being here, and let's dive into the story. Working the night shift wasn't exactly on my bucket list, especially not at my mom's 24-hour daycare center. But here I was, an 18-year-old screw-up whose recent antics had earned him a front-row seat to the land of nap mats and goldfish crackers. "Kyle, if you're not going to go to college or hold a real job, you're going to work for me," she'd said. And here I was, clocking in for my first night shift at 11 p.m. Susan, the other night shift employee, was already there when I arrived. She was 37, a single mom with 2 kids who attended the daycare for free while she got paid to look after everyone else's. Win-win, she liked to call it, though I wasn't so sure. "Welcome to the graveyard," Susan said, flashing me a grin as I entered the dimly lit building. The faint scent of sanitizer lingered in the air. "Try not to let the little monsters get to you." "Monsters? Please," I laughed, grabbing a clipboard from the counter. "How bad can a bunch of toddlers be?" "Famous last words," she replied, laughing softly. By 10:30, the kids started trickling in. Exhausted parents handed them over with quick instructions and bleary-eyed smiles before heading off to their graveyard shifts. Most of the kids were regulars, easy to handle, quiet after their parents left. But 3 new ones caught my attention immediately. The siblings, a boy and 2 girls, arrived together. They couldn't have been older than 7, 6, and 4, and they had this look about them. Pale, wide-eyed, and unsettlingly quiet, they clung to their mother as if she was the only thing keeping them tethered to the earth. "This is their first time here," their mom explained to Susan. "They'll settle in." I hope she shot a nervous glance at her kids before rushing out the door. At 11:05, a loud knock at the front door jolted me. "I'll get it," I said, strolling over. But when I opened the door, no one was there. Just a box sitting on the mat. "What is it?" Susan asked as I brought it inside. "No clue. No return address," I said, setting it down on the counter. Inside was a glass ornament, delicate and gleaming, nestled in tissue paper. Beside it was a piece of paper with burnt edges, as if someone had tried to set it on fire. Susan picked it up and squinted at the writing. "What does it say?" I asked. Her face paled. "It's some kind of list." The paper read, "Don't let the siblings out of your sight. Keep all sharp objects locked away. Never wake them if they sleep on their own. Don't ask them about their family. Under no circumstances feed them anything but what's in their bags." "Well, that's not creepy at all," I muttered, trying to shake off the weird vibe creeping over me. Susan sighed. "Probably a prank. Let's just keep an eye on them." Little did we know the night was about to take a turn we'd never forget. By midnight, most of the kids were tucked into their little nap mats, headphones on, listening to soothing music. Susan insisted it was the best way to keep them asleep through the night, and honestly, it seemed to work. The room was dim, lit only by a single lamp in the corner. The 3 siblings, however, weren't settling like the others. They didn't complain, didn't cry, just sat silently in a row near the back of the room, staring at nothing. It was unnerving, but Susan brushed it off. "They're probably just nervous," she said. "First night jitters." "Yeah, sure," I muttered, trying not to let my imagination run wild. Around 1 a.m., with the other kids snoozing peacefully, I decided to take a break. I pulled out my Nintendo Switch and started playing my favorite zombie game. Nothing like blasting virtual undead to pass the time in a room full of sleeping kids. Susan was in the corner, scrolling through her phone, occasionally checking on the kids. I was halfway through a particularly intense level when I felt a sharp pain on my arm. "Ow!" I yelped, dropping my Switch. One of the siblings, the youngest girl, was standing right next to me. Her small teeth were bared, and a faint trickle of blood was running down my arm where she'd bitten me. "What the hell?" I exclaimed, pulling back. Susan rushed over. "What happened?" "She bit me." I pointed to the girl, who was now staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes. "Kids bite sometimes," Susan said, though her voice wavered. "It's probably nothing." But it didn't feel like nothing. My arm throbbed, and the girl's expression wasn't the mischievous or guilty look you'd expect from a kid who'd done something wrong. It was predatory. Susan took the girl by the hand and led her back to the mat. The other two siblings were awake now, sitting upright and watching me with the same unsettling intensity. "Maybe it's time to check their bags," Susan suggested, her voice trembling. I retrieved the siblings' backpacks from the cubbies, each one labeled with their names. Though the names were strange, old-fashioned: Elric, Lila, and Mina. Inside the bags were neatly packed pouches of a dark red liquid, labeled cherry flavor. Susan pulled one out, frowning. "This doesn't look like juice." I held the pouch to the light, examining the way the liquid moved. It was thicker than juice. Too thick. "Do you think it's blood?" I whispered. "Don't be ridiculous," Susan said, though her tone wasn't convincing. She quickly put the pouch back and zipped the bag shut. By now, the siblings were on their feet, standing unnaturally still in the middle of the room. Their heads tilted slightly, eyes glinting red in the dim light. "Did their eyes just—" I started. "I don't want to know," Susan cut me off. The other kids were still asleep, blissfully unaware of the bizarre scene unfolding. I thought about the list of rules from the box. We'd broken Rule 3. Lila had woken up on her own. My stomach twisted as I realized we might have broken other rules without even knowing it. "They don't seem to care about the other kids," I said, my voice shaking. "Just us." "Let's hope it stays that way," Susan muttered. We both jumped as a loud thud came from the ceiling. "What was that?" I asked, looking up. Susan grabbed my arm. "Stay with the kids. I'll check it out." "Are you serious? What if it's—" "I'll be fine," she insisted, though she didn't sound confident. As Susan left the room, I was left alone with the siblings. They hadn't moved, hadn't blinked. Their stillness was almost worse than their earlier behavior. I clutched my switch like a security blanket, praying Susan would come back soon. The room felt impossibly quiet as I sat frozen, clutching my switch while the three siblings stared at me. Their eyes gleamed in the dim light, flickering red whenever they moved, though their movements were barely perceptible. Just subtle tilts of their heads, their attention unwavering. I tried to distract myself by glancing at the sleeping kids, headphones still snug on their little heads. They were blissfully unaware of the creeping dread that was filling the room. For a moment, I wondered if the music was more than just a sleep aid. Did it block out something? The thud above echoed again, and I found myself muttering under my breath, "Hurry up, Susan." Suddenly, the oldest of the siblings, Elric, smiled at me. Not the kind of smile you'd expect from a 7-year-old, a wide, sharp-toothed grin that sent a shiver down my spine. "You're scared of us," he said, his voice soft but eerily confident. "Scared of you?" I forced a laugh, trying to cover my growing fear. "What's there to be scared of? You're just kids." Elric's smile widened, his teeth looking sharper than they had any right to. "We're not just kids," Lila whispered, her voice barely audible but chilling nonetheless. "Right, of course not," I said, my hands gripping the armrest of my chair. "You're, what? Special?" Mina, the youngest, crouched low to the ground, moving unnervingly fast as she crawled up the nearest wall. My heart jumped into my throat as I watched her, defying every law of physics, scuttle toward the ceiling. "Okay, that's not normal," I said, standing so quickly I almost knocked over my chair. "Mina, get down," Elric commanded, his tone more playful than stern. "You'll scare him too much." I backed up toward the door, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the knob. "Susan?" I called out, my voice cracking. "Susan, I need you back here. Like now!" The siblings started to laugh, a low, hollow sound that echoed through the room. It wasn't the kind of laugh that kids made. It was ancient, cold, and full of something far darker than I could comprehend. Just as I thought I might lose it completely, Susan burst back into the room, her face pale and her hands shaking. "What's going on?" she demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. I pointed toward Mina, who was now hanging upside down from the ceiling, her red eyes glowing in the dark. Susan froze, her mouth opening and closing as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. "They're not normal," I stammered. "They're not, I know." She cut me off, her voice sharp. "I figured that out when I saw the footprints on the ceiling in the other room." "What?" She nodded, clutching the edge of a table to steady herself. "I don't know what they are, but we need to follow the rules." The words hit me like a brick. The rules. Of course. "We already broke some," I said. Lila woke up on her own. We opened their bags. "What now?" Susan bit her lip, her eyes darting between the siblings. "We can't let them know we're scared. Keep them occupied. Keep the other kids safe." "Keep them occupied? How am I supposed to do that? A game of Uno? Just do something," she snapped. I turned back to the siblings, who were now watching us with amused expressions, as if this were all some twisted game. Okay," I said, my mind racing. "You guys want to play a game?" Elric tilted his head, his grin widening. "We like games." "Great," I said, though my voice wavered. "Let's, sit down and play something. No crawling on the walls, okay?" To my surprise, Mina dropped gracefully from the ceiling, landing on her feet like a cat. Susan started ushering the other kids to the far side of the room, keeping them blissfully unaware of what was happening. Meanwhile, I fumbled to set up some board game I found in the corner. As the siblings sat down, their movements were fluid, almost too smooth. They didn't speak much, but their eyes never left me, and their smiles never wavered. This wasn't going to be an ordinary night. The siblings sat cross-legged on the floor, their gazes unblinking as I set up the board game. My hands trembled as I tried to keep my focus on the pieces, but it was nearly impossible with their eyes boring into me. Susan was busy in the corner, checking on the other kids and pretending everything was fine, though I could tell she was barely holding it together. "What's the game?" Elric asked, his voice smooth and eerily calm. It's trouble," I said, holding up the box. "You like trouble?" Elric's grin widened. "We're very good at it." Of course they are, I thought. I quickly went over the rules, though my voice kept faltering. They didn't seem to care much about the game itself, more about me. Every time I glanced up, I caught one of them staring, their eyes glowing faintly red under the lamp's light. We played a few rounds, and I tried to act like everything was normal. I even forced a laugh here and there, hoping it would ease the tension. But the whole time I couldn't stop thinking about the pouches in their bags, the unnatural way Mina had crawled on the wall, or the rules we'd broken. "You're not very good at this, are you?" Lila said, breaking the silence. I blinked. "What?" "The game," she said, her voice carrying an edge of mockery. "You're losing." "Yeah, well, maybe I'm just tired," I muttered. Elric leaned forward, his grin sharp enough to cut glass. "You're scared of us." I felt my stomach drop. "I'm not scared." "You should be," Mina whispered, her voice so soft I barely heard it. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up abruptly, knocking the board game over. "Okay, I think it's time for everyone to settle down," I said, trying to sound firm. The siblings didn't argue, didn't protest. They just stared at me, their smiles never fading. Slowly, they rose to their feet and walked back to their mats, lying down side by side. It should have been a relief, but somehow it felt even more unsettling. Susan came over, her face pale. "Are they asleep?" "I don't know," I whispered. "I don't care. I just want this night to be over." As if on cue, another loud thud echoed from the ceiling, followed by the faint sound of something scratching. Susan grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Kyle, we need to check the rest of the building." You mean I need to check the rest of the building? I said. She didn't argue. I grabbed a flashlight from the supply closet and made my way down the dark hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. The daycare was eerily silent, except for the occasional creak of the floorboards. When I reached the main playroom, I froze. The glass ornament from the box was sitting on the table, though I distinctly remembered leaving it on the counter earlier. Beside it was the list of rules, the edges glowing faintly, as if they were still burning. My breath caught as I noticed something new. At the bottom of the list, a sixth rule had appeared, written in shaky, black ink. 6. If they smile at you, don't smile back. I felt a cold chill run down my spine as I heard a soft giggle behind me. Slowly, I turned around. Mina was standing in the doorway, her head tilted to the side and her red eyes gleaming. "You're breaking the rules again," she said, her voice sing-songy. I took a step back, gripping the flashlight like it was a weapon. "I'm just checking on things." Her smile widened, showing teeth far sharper than they should have been. "Don't worry," she said, stepping closer. "We'll let you play again." Before I could respond, Susan's voice echoed down the hallway. "Kyle, are you okay?" I turned toward her voice, and when I looked back, Mina was gone. By the time I returned to the main room, my nerves were shot. Susan's worried face didn't help much either. "What happened?" she asked, her voice tight. "Mina," I said, struggling to get the words out. "She was in the hallway, talking to me. Then she just vanished." Susan's face went pale. "Vanished? Are you sure?" "I know what I saw, Susan." My voice cracked and I felt myself shaking. "There's something seriously wrong with those kids. They're not normal." She didn't argue this time. Instead, she glanced toward the sleeping mats. The siblings were lying perfectly still, side by side, their faces peaceful, almost angelic. It was a stark contrast to what I'd just experienced. "We need to get through the rest of the night," Susan whispered. "Stick to the rules, no matter what." I nodded, though my heart was pounding in my chest. The next couple of hours were agonizing. The siblings didn't move, didn't stir, but their presence was suffocating. Every so often, I thought I saw one of their eyes open, just a flicker of red in the darkness. But when I looked again, they were still. At 4 a.m., Susan handed out snacks to the other kids, carefully avoiding the siblings. I kept watch, my flashlight clutched in one hand, my eyes darting to every shadow. That's when I noticed them. The siblings were sitting upright on their mats, each holding a pouch of that thick, dark liquid. They sipped quietly, their eyes locked on me. I couldn't take it anymore. "What's in those pouches?" I asked, my voice trembling. Elric's lips curled into a grin. "Cherry flavor," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. Susan shot me a warning look. "Don't ask them questions. Remember the rules." I bit my tongue, but my stomach churned as I watched them drink. There was no way that stuff was juice. Around 5 a.m., the other kids started stirring. Susan and I tried to keep things calm, but the tension was unbearable. The siblings, however, stayed eerily quiet, their eyes following every movement. At one point, one of the regular kids, a little boy named Tommy, wandered too close to their mats. Mina reached out, her fingers brushing his arm. Tommy froze, his face going pale. "Come on, buddy," Susan said quickly, scooping him up and carrying him back to the other side of the room. Mina just smiled, her teeth glinting in the dim light. By 6:30 a.m., the parents started arriving to pick up their kids. The regulars left quickly, their sleepy faces lighting up when they saw their moms and dads. But the siblings didn't move. Their mother arrived last, looking frazzled as she stepped into the room. "How were they?" she asked, her voice hesitant. Susan and I exchanged a glance. "They were fine," Susan said carefully. The siblings stood up, their movements unnervingly fluid, and walked over to their mom. Elric turned back to us one last time, his eyes gleaming. "See you soon," he said, his voice soft but chilling. Their mother hurried them out the door, and the moment it closed behind them, I felt like I could finally breathe again. Susan sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. That was the longest night of my life. "No kidding," I muttered, collapsing into a chair beside her. My arm still throbbed from where Mina had bitten me earlier, and my head was pounding from the stress. When my mom arrived at 7 a.m. to relieve us, I pulled her aside and told her everything. The siblings, the rules, the strange behavior. We didn't hold anything back. She listened quietly, her face growing more serious with every word. "I'll talk to their mother," she said finally. "They won't be coming back." I nodded, relief washing over me. But as I left the daycare that morning, a lingering thought gnawed at the back of my mind. What if we hadn't followed the rules? By the time I got home, I was running on fumes. The adrenaline that had carried me through the night had long since burned out, leaving me utterly drained. I collapsed onto my bed, not even bothering to change out of my uniform. Sleep came almost immediately, heavy and dreamless. When I woke up, the sun was setting, its last golden rays filtering through my window. I groaned, rubbing my eyes. Sleeping through the day wasn't unusual after a night shift, but this felt different, deeper, like I'd been out for days. As I swung my legs off the bed, a sharp pain shot through my arm. I looked down at the bite mark from Mina. The wound, which should have been red and swollen, was gone. I stared at my arm, turning it over to examine the smooth, unblemished skin. It was as if the bite had never happened. "What the hell?" I muttered, running my fingers over the spot. Over the next few days, things only got weirder. For one, my sleeping habits changed drastically. I couldn't seem to stay awake during the day anymore. Every morning, as soon as the sunlight hit my window, I felt an overwhelming urge to crawl back under the covers and sleep. At first, I blamed it on the night shifts, but deep down, I knew something else was going on. And then there was the hunger. It started small, a slight aversion to the usual junk food I loved. Burgers, fries, pizza, none of it appealed to me anymore. Instead, I found myself craving something else. The first time I noticed it, I was helping my mom cook dinner. She'd sliced her finger while chopping onions, and a single drop of blood had landed on the cutting board. My reaction was immediate and horrifying. My mouth watered. I caught myself leaning forward, staring at the tiny crimson bead like it was the most delicious thing I'd ever seen. "You okay, Kyle?" my mom asked, pressing a paper towel to her cut. I snapped out of it, stumbling back from the counter. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired." She gave me a concerned look but didn't press further. Later that night, I found myself sitting in the dark, replaying the events at the daycare in my mind. Mina's bite, the siblings' glowing red eyes, the strange rules, and now this. I didn't want to admit it, but the pieces were starting to fit together. I grabbed my phone and opened the browser, typing in the words I'd been avoiding. Symptoms of becoming a vampire. The results made my stomach drop. Aversion to sunlight, unnatural healing, craving blood. I threw the phone onto my bed, my heart pounding. This couldn't be happening. Vampires weren't real. They couldn't be real. But then I remembered Elric's parting words. "See you soon." A chill ran down my spine as I realized what he meant. They didn't just bite me. They changed me.